Chapter 16. A few minutes, or maybe a few lifetimes later, the door behind me slid open. Alex had come for me. I clung tighter to the railing, my chest squeezed up. I couldn't breathe. Footsteps thudded on the balcony, getting closer and closer. My heart hammered. A blue and silver badge flashed in front of my eyes. A voice said, "I'm here to help you. It's okay. We got a couple of 911 calls." I trembled and sobbed and untangled myself. "I thought you were Alex. I thought you were Alex. I thought you were Alex." The police officer led me back through the sliding glass door. The hotel room looked untouched, undisturbed, like it was a regular room waiting for regular guests, except there was a small rip in the carpet I hadn't noticed before, and one of the pictures on the wall was crooked. The officer gazed at me closely, examining my face, my eyes. "I'm Officer Stevens, and I'm going to help you." He had wrinkles on his forehead, frown lines, like he spent a lot of time asking serious questions. "What's your name?" I fought back more sobs and forced myself to speak. "Julia Colson." "Would you prefer to go somewhere else to talk? Do you need to get out of this room?" His voice was quiet and full of concern. I shook my head. I didn't want to go out into the hotel, or worse, the mall, where there'd be a lot of people around. He motioned toward the chair I'd been sitting in before. "You can sit down if you'd be more comfortable." I wasn't about to sit back down there. "Do your parents know you're here?" A wave of guilt washed over me. "My sister dropped me off at the mall. They all thought I was just meeting friends." I shifted my weight from foot to foot and wrung my hands together. "We'll contact them soon, but can you first tell me who Alex is? Did he hurt you?" "He grabbed me, but I got away." After I explained what had happened, Officer Stevens spoke into a portable radio to get backup in case Alex was still around. Then he called my parents at Dad's work dinner in D.C. Listening to his end of the conversation, it was obvious that facing them would be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But all I wanted was to get home to my family, no matter how much trouble I was in. "I'll be back in touch soon," Officer Stevens said before hanging up. My voice was still shaky. "Am I done now?" He spoke into the radio again, then looked at me. "We have a special detective to investigate situations like this. Another lady, Miss Polinsky, will be coming with her. She's a victim advocate, which means her whole job is to support you. We can wait for your parents to get here, and they can take you to meet them." I felt like I was watching all of this happen to someone else. I really just want to go home. My mouth was so dry that I could barely swallow. Officer Stevens nodded like he understood. "I'll let Detective Marchette know. She and Mrs. Polinsky can drive you to your house and meet your parents there. It'll take just a few minutes for them to get over here." When they arrived, Officer Stevens filled them in a little more. He stayed back to collect evidence, but I could finally leave. Soon, the two ladies and I were walking through the exact same lobby I'd been in with Tyler, only it was like I was a whole different person now. The people around the hotel were talking and laughing as if everything was fine. How could they be acting so normal at a time like this? I stared down at the carpet as I walked so there was no way I'd have to make eye contact with anyone. When we got out to the parking lot, Detective Marchette unlocked her car and got in the driver's seat. Miss Polinsky turned to me. "Want to ride up front?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "Mind if I sit with you? I'm just here to help." I nodded and then climbed into the car and buckled my seatbelt. My legs were rubbery and weak. Detective Marchette turned back to me. "We're going to need to do a formal interview at the Child Advocacy Center, where Miss Polinsky works. It just means a person there will ask you some questions and get the details we need for the investigation. Would you rather go tonight, or do you want to wait until the morning?" "Can we do it tomorrow?" "Absolutely." I didn't say anything as Detective Marchette pulled out of the parking lot, but after a couple of minutes, I turned to Miss Polinsky. I had to find out what was going on. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice raspy. "A lot of people will do everything they can to find those men." Her tone was firm and determined. "Why did they do this to me?" Miss Polinsky's eyebrows scrunched up. "You sure you want to talk about this right now? Or do you want to wait until we meet up with your parents?" "I want to know." She let out a long breath. From what from what you described, it sounds as though Tyler was probably a recruiter, someone who gains a person's trust in order to hand them over to a trafficker, like that man Alex. Her voice softened. Traffickers force their victims to do whatever they're told, and they don't let them leave. My throat burned again. How can this be real? How can anyone do that? As Miss Polinsky held my gaze, I couldn't help noticing the kindness in her eyes, so different from Alex's cold stare. It's hard to understand how anyone could treat another human being that way, but some people will do absolutely anything to make money, tragically. She shared some facts with me about the thousands of kids lured or captured into trafficking every year. Every number of each statistic was a real person like me, whose life had become a living nightmare, and I could have been one of them. Do the kids usually make it back home? She shook her head slowly. Sometimes, but not always. I began shaking harder than ever. I might never have seen my friends and family again or gone back to the barn. She patted me on the arm. I'm so sorry this happened to you. So was I. But at least I'd gotten away. I ripped the gold necklace off my neck and handed it to her. Here. He gave me this. Maybe you can get fingerprints off it or something. We drove down the highway past a few small motels. Could there be kids like me in any of those places, trapped there by someone who had pretended to care about them? I picked at the bright red polish on my nails, trying to peel it away, but it wouldn't come off. When Detective Marchette pulled up at the curb in front of my house, Mom, Dad, and Danielle rushed over from where they'd been standing on the porch. My parents must have raced home the second they got the call. Dad reached out his hand to help me from the car and didn't let go. Danielle had tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm trying to understand, Mom said as we sat around the kitchen table with Detective Marchette and Mrs. Polinsky. You posted a picture online, and this stranger asked you out. And you met him at the mall? How long has this been going on? Her voice shook like she could hardly believe what was happening. A few weeks. My cheeks burned, but I didn't get in his car. We always stayed at the mall. Then how? Mom's question hung in the air. It was hard, but I told them the story. How we messaged and then met up. How he told me we were meeting his friend. Hearing myself say it made me realize how reckless I'd been. He seemed so nice. We talked a lot online, and he wanted to know all about me. I thought, what had I thought? I thought I meant something to him. I thought he was my friend, maybe more. Tears filled my eyes again. These guys are pros, Detective Marchette said. They know exactly what to say to kids and exactly how to say it. I'm sure the perpetrator was very convincing. Dad tightened his arms around me, his body shaking. I'd never seen him cry before. Julia did something very wise, Miss Polinsky nodded toward me. She was offered a drink, likely laced with a drug that would have knocked her out, and she pretended to try it but didn't actually have any. She kept her wits about her and managed to escape. Good job, kid, Dad whispered, but Mom burst into tears, and Danielle had never stopped crying. My family was a mess, and it was all my fault. Dad looked back at Detective Marchette. Now what? How do we keep her safe? First, she needs to shut down her social media accounts, except the one she used to correspond with the perpetrator. We'd like to access it as part of the investigation. Dad nodded. Of course. Please do whatever you need. I also recommend you get a security team for your home if you don't already have one. Security system, Detective Marchette said, and Julia shouldn't walk around the neighborhood by herself or go into any public place alone. Mom sniffled. These men who did this to Julia, what's going to happen to them? Will someone stay on the case until they get locked up? We'll do everything in our power to catch them and bring them to justice. Detective Marchette sounded so calm and sure of herself, like everything would be okay. But I imagine Tyler and Alex out there somewhere, furious at me for getting away. Do you think they'll come searching for me? There was gravel in my voice. Danielle got up and brought me a glass of water. The tears were streaming out of my sister's eyes faster than she could wipe them away. It's unlikely, but possible. Since we can't predict what they'll do, you have to be very aware of your surroundings at all times. Detective Marchette reached into her pocket and put a small card on the table. Here's my contact information. Please call me at any time if you have questions or if anything related to this comes up. She stood and turned to me. If you ever hear from either of those men, contact me immediately, no matter what, okay? The water soothed my aching throat. I will, I promise. Even though Julia got away, this is a very traumatic situation for all of you. Miss Polinsky handed Mom a slip of paper. I thought your family might be interested in getting some counseling. Here's a list of recommended professionals. Mom's hand shook when she took the paper. Thank you. I appreciate. It was obvious she was trying to hold it together, but her voice broke. Miss Polinsky nodded. You're very welcome. Yes, we really appreciate your help, Dad said. Thank you both so much for everything. We'll see you tomorrow at the Child Advocacy Center, Miss Polinsky said, standing up. Dad walked them to the door and then came right back. We have a lot to talk about, but what matters now is that you're safe. Let's close these accounts and try to get some rest. What I wanted then more than anything was to take a hot bath, put on my softest pajamas, and curl up in bed with Louie in my arms. But I couldn't yet. Mom and Dad followed me upstairs and stood in the doorway of the den while I logged on to the first of my social media accounts. I looked through the settings and found delete account. It buffered for what seemed like forever. If you click here, your photos, videos, comments, likes, and followers will be permanently removed. I hesitated for a split second, thinking of all that would be lost. What would everyone at school say? People would ask why I suddenly disappeared from almost all social media. Then I pictured Alex and what he might do to anyone who posted their location. I took a deep breath and clicked. Tears blurred my eyes as I logged on to the rest of my accounts and deleted all but that one. My fingers trembled as I remembered all the time Tyler and I spent messaging and how it had made me feel. I'd thought he cared about me, that I mattered to him. My heart hurt as if it had been thrown out into the road and run over by a truck. I wanted to scream, punch the walls, and smash something into a million pieces. I rushed past my parents, who were still standing in the doorway, and I ran into my room, slamming the door hard behind me. Julia? My sister knocked softly a few minutes later. Can I come in? Her voice was shaky and quiet. I didn't answer. She cracked the door open. I know we haven't done this since we were little kids, but can I sleep in your room tonight? My pulse was still racing, and I definitely didn't feel like talking to anyone, but it was good having her here with me. I silently watched as she put her sleeping bag on the floor. Then I lay there with my eyes closed, my mind replaying all that had happened again and again. After a while, Danielle moved up into the bed beside me. She looked over at me with huge eyes and said, I can't believe I could have lost you forever.